Hello, this is Gabriel McBird on the 19th of March 2021. I've recently been involved in some discussions on Facebook about the fact that there are fewer and fewer independent bakeries or at least small local chains. And quite a few people came to the defence of Greggs, and I have to say that my general view of Greggs is that it really isn't very good, even for what you pay. So yesterday, I decided that that I was going to eat Greggs and only Greggs for the whole day, which I did, although I didn't have anything sweet because not many of the cakes really called me. Although it was a glaring omission not to include something sweet, I think. Anyway, here was the roundup. I had a Greggs steak bake. I had a standard Greggs sausage roll. I had a Greggs sausage butty, or a Greggs sausage roll, sausage breakfast roll as they call them. A Greggs bacon breakfast roll.
Minus 20.19, pause, button, a red and grey.
And also I had a Greggs southern fried hot baguette. And I also had a Greggs, a coffee. I went for the mocha with a shot of vanilla syrup. So I was okay with some products and quite disappointed by others. So the sausage roll, which is one of the most common Greggs products, it's the one that gets the most advertised and is the most well-known. What I would say about the sausage roll is that it tastes actually okay. It's certainly, if you're the person who is used to sausage rolls in the 70s and the 80s, it tastes okay. There's reasonably, a little bit of spice in the sausage. It's, a bit of white pepper at least. It's not just bland. But the actual quality is very mushy. I do think we're talking stuff that is mechanically recovered. It's mush. But, mush covered in pastry, £1.20 for what I would describe as a medium-sized sausage roll. Yeah, it's a basic British sausage roll, but I'm not really sure it's part of our cuisine that we should be over proud of. But anyway, if you know his 70s and 80s mushy sausage rolls, then this was it. I also had the steak bake. A steak bake is like really a pasty type idea. It's square and it has steak in quite a rich gravy, rich is probably the wrong word. Quite a tasty gravy, I would say, quite meaty. And I thought this was actually okay for what you paid. I mean, the steak was largely shredded rather than in square chunks. It was a bit soft. But, there was a reasonable amount of it. It was tasty. And I would say the steak was probably the best of the products I had. Then there was the bacon roll, which was just bacon. It described itself on the website as oven-baked bacon in a soft roll. And it was that. It wasn't smoked or anything. It wasn't great quality, but it was all right. It came as part of a deal for, I think, about $3.80 or something, which also included a coffee. The sausage breakfast roll, as opposed to the pastry sausage roll. The sausage breakfast roll was rather disappointing. The sausages weren't that tasty. They were thin and they really were mush. I would personally recommend leaving the sausage roll well alone. It really isn't great. And then lastly, there was the chicken the southern fried chicken with chipotle. It was southern fried chicken with chipotle sauce and onions. Now, the nicest bit about all this, to be honest, was the sauce and the onions. The chicken was definitely reformed, quite processed. There was a reasonable amount of it, but there was no real taste of anything southern fried. I wasn't sure whether it was meant to be crispy originally, but if it was, it tasted as though it had been microwaved, and so any crispiness had just turned into sogginess. Not very good. I suppose the baguette itself was crispy, though it tasted perhaps as though it'd been one of them partial bake jobs that had been in the oven. So it was at least crispy and a reasonable size. But the chicken part of it was particularly disappointing. And at £3.89, I've had better from sandwich shops that contain proper meat and more, plenty of recognisable ingredients. The spice level was quite good, so I will give it a reasonable mark for that. Lastly, we come to the coffee, the mocha coffee, which tasted quite chocolatey. I thought the coffee was a bit weak, and the vanilla syrup was also quite prominent, but because the coffee was somewhat weak, it got lost in the rest of the flavours a little bit. It's hot liquid, and at the price, in the price of, as part of the deal, you often pay ridiculous amounts for coffee, so that wasn't bad. But I genuinely don't think it's changed my view of Greggs at all, which is that it's a shame that often Greggs has muscled its way into individual bakeries or small local chains, taking them over and often providing food which is not particularly good quality. I don't think Greggs on the high street is necessarily that welcome. However, Greggs does appear in places where there are no other affordable alternatives, such as, high-end shopping centres. I'm thinking of Westfield, London, or the Printworks in Manchester, or those kind of places. The redesigned Bullring in Birmingham or whatever. And often it's hard to find affordable places there, and I think Greggs is quite useful in that situation. Greggs also appears at a lot of service stations where everything else is ridiculously expensive, but if you need a quick bite to break up a journey, they will do you something which is cheap and a bit tacky, but far cheaper than anything else. It's fairly hard to give Greggs a mark, because there are other things I've had from Greggs in the past. I've had the cheese and onion pasty, that's really quite nice. It's cheese, onion, just in a pasty. It's quite tasty. It's reasonably good. And Greggs in the Newcastle area do the cheese savoury stotty, which is grated cheese and a bit of mayo and a bit of onion inside in a roll. It's like a very dense, big bread roll, really. That's quite pleasant, reasonable amount of it, cheap and cheerful. They could easily export that outside of Newcastle, but for whatever reason, they've chosen not to do it. So, marking Greggs, I'm probably going to give it about 5 out of 10, I think. There were areas that showed promise, but too many of the products are just too tacky, even for what they charge.
-23 point. Pause. Button. Stop. Button. Stop.